Hey everyone, we are week 5, so we're about halfway done. I know it's tough, continue to do your best. If you need a little more time for stuff, that's fine. Don't worry. Ultimately, if you can get everything done by the end of the quarter, we'll all be good. Obviously, the pandemic is tough and life is tough, so, just do the best you can. But this week and the preceding weeks are actually going to get a little bit more interesting. I know, hopefully last week kind of opened things up a little bit with, expressivism, um, and kind of moving out of that old school, current traditional pedagogy. Although I want you to think about how there are remnants of all of these theories kind of embedded in composition programs and curriculums and the ways that we think about writing and teach writing. So that's something that you can think about. But this week, we'll move more into the writing process movement. And then that kind of goes into the cognitive movement, which, they're basically connected. But one of the, actual significant movements in composition is cognitivism. And there's a big period there where scholars, writing studies scholars, try to use cognition and cognition theory to essentially, argue things about how the mind works in relation to writing and teaching writing and learning writing. Many things that will actually prove to be extremely problematic, but we'll get into that. So expressivism is cool because it gives you that kind of idea that uh, writing is a tool for thinking and expressing yourself. And that kind of led to the writing process movement and a focus on process instead of product. And also, the writing across the curriculum movement started to kind of begin in the early 70s as a result of Janet Emig's work. So Janet Emig is an important figure, and I'll spend most of this video just kind of talking about her since she kind of sets up some of the major ideas and theories we work with in this module. So in the 60s, Emig was at Michigan earning a master's degree, and she was trying to get into the PhD program there in education, um, and she was denied. Apparently, there was like really rampant sexism at Michigan, as there was basically everywhere. So she went and taught high school for like 10 years before she went back to Harvard. And at Harvard, she didn't really have any mentors or anyone there to kind of like guide her. So it took her almost 8 years, I think, to finish her dissertation and her work there. But ultimately, Janet Emig studied how 12th graders write. So her famous book, which is modeled off her dissertation, is um, The Writing Process of 12th Graders. And like I said, she studied a lot of the 12th graders that she was teaching at her school. And the cool thing about Emig is she basically invented the case study model. So case studies are basically a methodology for collecting uh, qualitative research. So, for example, a case study might involve, following around students while they write in different contexts and interviewing them and observing them and surveying them and, essentially collecting information about what they're doing, why they're doing it, how they're doing it, and then coding it and analyzing it, etc. But before Janet Emig's work, there had never really been case studies done at all. So she was essentially inventing an entire methodology for writing studies that would become really big. Like, for example, when I got my dissertation done, I used case studies. My methodology for collecting research was 3 case studies. I followed 3 different professors from 3 different disciplines use video feedback to respond to writing assignments in their courses. So I interviewed them. I collected data about their courses, about their feedback processes. So that's a case study methodology that Janet Emig basically invented. Um, so she was studying the writing process. She was inventing ways to study the writing process. And the ultimate conclusion for her project that really kind of resonates today is that writing is a learning tool. And essentially, one of the major theories from the Writing Across the Curriculum movement, writing to learn theory, which basically says that writing is a tool for learning, and that's all it has to be. She basically invented that, more or less. And she essentially set in motion the writing process movement. She was a big contributor to the cognitivism movement, where she essentially did studies, case studies about cognition and writing process. So Janet Emig is a big figure. She set up all of this kind of writing process research ideas and methodologies. And people like Sandra Pearl, Amina Shaughnessy, and Carol Birkenkotter all borrowed those types of approaches to studying writing and did their own studies on professional writers, on unskilled writers. Those of you that have had a chance to read Pearl's work, you'll see that it's basically a case study methodology. And it's starting to move into that application of cognition and examining, thinking and psychology in relation to writing and using writing. So next week we'll go into the writing process movement and cognition. So this module you'll start to see how expressivism, kind of like, although brief period, still resonates with a lot of people today. But it set that idea of the writing process over the product in motion. And you can probably see why, right? And then, of course, that shift from truth inside the individual versus outside. That was a big theoretical move as well. So again, we'll move deep into the writing process movement. You'll see some really good pieces and contributors to that this week in your reading. And then next week, we'll move the writing process movement deep into its application of cognition. And then we'll end with a really good takedown of cognitivism and process theory by Mike Rose. And that'll start to move us into kind of post-process theory where we are today. And we'll look at all the different types of angles and perspectives post-process. So the next 2 weeks, we're looking at the process movement and its, everlasting impact on teaching writing. So again, these next 2 weeks I think are really cool and interesting and important, and that really kind of set in motion the whole field and its kind of movement towards where we are today. All right, so have a good week. If you need anything, of course, please let me know. I'm happy to meet with anybody one-on-one to talk about anything in the course, any readings, any of the feedback. If you want more feedback, please let me know. Otherwise, have a good week, and I will see you next week.